There are 4 different types of unemployment: frictional, seasonal, structural, and cyclical. So let's look at each one of these. Frictional unemployment is voluntary. This type of unemployment we're willing to have some of as people transition from one job to another. So, for example, let's suppose that you've always wanted to live in sunny Vancouver. So you quit your job here in Alberta, you move to Vancouver, and you start to look for work there. Now, you're unemployed because you chose to move. There's nothing wrong with this type of unemployment. We recognize that there's always going to be some frictional unemployment as people look for work, as they transition from one job to another. When you look for your first job, you'll be frictionally unemployed. So we recognize that there will always be some frictional unemployment, and we're okay with that. So frictional unemployment is not really a problem for an economy. What we do have to consider is that we can impact the level of frictional unemployment based on what we do with employment insurance. So to be eligible for EI, employment insurance, you must be ready and willing to work. You can receive EI for 19 to 52 weeks, and that's really going to depend on the economic conditions in your province. So the length of eligibility for EI is tied to the provincial unemployment rate. The higher the unemployment rate in your province, the idea is that you're competing against a lot more people to find jobs. It's going to be harder to find a job, and so you should receive EI for longer. If the unemployment rate is really low in your province, then the EI period, the period you can receive EI, is going to be much shorter because there's lots of jobs to choose from, not as much people competing against you to find those jobs, and so you should be able to find something. So the lower the unemployment rate in your province, the less time you can be on EI. So you're eligible for EI for 19 to 52 weeks, and you get about 55% of your former income. Now, what happens if we change policies on EI? What if we change the amount of time that you're eligible, or the amount of money that you're able to receive? Well, this is going to impact frictional unemployment. And it impacts frictional unemployment because the more EI you receive, or the longer you receive EI, the more picky you can be about which job you find. So instead of taking the first job that you find because you need the paycheck right away, you can wait until it's the job that's in your specialty, that pays the amount you want, and things like that. So changing the employment insurance can impact the level of frictional unemployment because it impacts how quickly we are forced to take the next job, or if we can wait for a different one. The second type of unemployment is seasonal unemployment. Seasonal unemployment is unemployment caused by seasonal variations. So, for example, every Christmas, there's a decrease in the unemployment rate. Why would that be? Well, because in December, right, lots of Christmas shopping, lots of holiday shopping, so there's a lot of part-time jobs, especially in retail. And so what happens is we hire more people in the month of December, makes the unemployment rate fall, and then come January we no longer need that workforce, and the unemployment rate goes up. Well, we understand that there's always going to be industries that have more seasonal unemployment. So we're not as worried about seasonal unemployment as other types. So can you tell me what industries have the most seasonal unemployment? So can you guess the top 4 industries that have seasonal unemployment? The first is agriculture. The second is forestry. And in fact, forestry does most of their work in the winter. It's easier to chop down and move trees when they're not covered in leaves. So you can see that in forestry, there's more jobs in the wintertime and less jobs in the summer. In agriculture, it's the opposite, more in the summer and fall and less in the winter. The third industry that has the most seasonal unemployment is fishing. And the fourth one is construction. So based on this, which provinces do you think have the most seasonal unemployment? Well, the first is PEI. The second is New Brunswick. The third, Newfoundland. And the fourth, Nova Scotia. So we can see those provinces are going to have a lot of variability in their unemployment rate throughout the year. Okay. PEI, which does a lot of agriculture and fishing, is going to see a big uptick in the unemployment rate as you go into the winter season. The third type of unemployment is what is called structural unemployment. Structural unemployment is unemployment that exists because what we are buying as consumers has changed. So when demand patterns, when what consumers buy change, we no longer need people to make the same things they bought before. So for example, let's say that you used to make VHS cassettes. Okay, well, today, how many people buy VHS cassettes? Well, like nobody, right? So in that case, why do we need to pay people to make them? We don't. And because of this change in demand for goods, everyone who makes VHS cassettes for a living gets laid off and has to find a new job in a different industry. This is structural unemployment. And because the job and the skills that you used to do are no longer available and you're now forced to find a different industry to work in, it's the longest lasting type of unemployment. This type of unemployment can last for generations. Because if your skills don't match the jobs available, you either have to go back to school and get retraining, which some of you might be doing in this class, or we have to wait an entire generation until your kids get training in a completely different industry. So it can take a long time with structural unemployment. Structural unemployment exists because workers might be outsourced, so it might be cheaper to manufacture cars outside of the country, which means all those who are skilled at making cars, their skills no longer match the jobs within the country. So outsourcing can cause this structural unemployment. We also see structural unemployment as employees get replaced by technology. And this is becoming a bigger and bigger issue because in the next decade or so, we'll see a lot of automation. And that automation will happen in industries that are predominantly done by males. So for example, I think it's 85% of truck drivers are male, and they expect within a decade that we won't need truck drivers at all because they'll be replaced by self-driving vehicles. So when you're replaced by technology, you're structurally unemployed, and this can have a disproportionate effect with the technology on men simply because of the industries they're in. And the structural unemployment is long-lasting. When we look at the layoffs from the 2008-2009 recession, most of the jobs that were lost, we said, were from men, and they were in the auto industry and in oil and natural gas production. The industries that were doing the most hiring tend to be more service industries like education, healthcare, financial services, which is why women didn't experience the same change in unemployment than men did. Same is true when we talk about replacement by technology. Industries that are least likely to be replaced by technology are service industries like healthcare. And so because these industries are predominantly female, women are less likely to experience this structural unemployment. Well, if we look back in history, back to the Industrial Revolution, structural unemployment was even a problem back then. So back during the Industrial Revolution, people moved from the farm, they lived in the big cities, they worked in the factory. And as they were starting to do their mass production, there started to be greater uses of technology, of machines. And this began to concern factory workers because these machines could replace them. And so we had a group called the Luddites, and the Luddites were a group of workers in England who were angry about losing their jobs to machines. Well, losing your jobs to technology during the Industrial Revolution was such a big problem that there was a lot of sabotage. Now, the word sabotage comes from the French word sabot, which means wooden shoe. Oh, why are we having this English lesson? Well, the word sabot, wooden shoe, what was happening is the Luddites, they were sabotaging the machines by taking their shoes and shoving them in the equipment. And if you shoved them into the equipment would break. And if the equipment didn't work, if the technology wasn't working, you needed workers. So the idea was they could save their jobs. This was such a big problem during the Industrial Revolution that acts of sabotage were punishable by the death penalty. And today, we call people who are afraid of technology Luddites. Ever hear someone say, "Oh, I'm such a Luddite," right? I don't like email or Facebook. I'm such a Luddite. Luddite means afraid of technology, and it comes from a group during the Industrial Revolution who were sabotaging the equipment because they were afraid they would be replaced by technology and have structural unemployment. The fourth type of unemployment is cyclical unemployment. Cyclical unemployment is unemployment that's caused by the business cycles, right? Expansion, peak, contraction, trough. If during this contraction period, the unemployment rate is going up, it's cyclical unemployment. Unemployment caused by the fact that the economy is producing less goods and services, so real GDP is declining, which means we're not making as much stuff and we're laying people off. Now, when the economy is expanding, the economy is growing, real GDP is going up, we're making more goods and services. In that case, now we need to hire more people. Cyclical unemployment goes down. So if it's unemployment that's happening because of where you are in the business cycle, we have cyclical unemployment. Now, we talked before about what it means to be at a full employment. And we said it was impossible to have truly full employment for everyone who wants a job to have it. Because there's always going to be some frictional unemployment, those are voluntary changes. There's always going to be some structural unemployment because we don't buy the same things we bought decades ago. But when there is no cyclical unemployment, we are considered to be at full employment. So the natural rate of unemployment is our full employment. And if you'll recall, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, you are at full employment if your unemployment rate is between 4 and 6.4%. Well, this natural rate of unemployment is also the lowest rate of unemployment before, so if the unemployment rate drops even lower, you create inflation. And so if you'll recall, we graphed the Phillips curve earlier this semester, and that Phillips curve looked at that relationship between inflation and unemployment. One of your activities this week is to graph the Phillips curve and explain that relationship. The reason we bring it up now is because when we talk about the natural rate of unemployment, if the unemployment rate falls below that, then we start to see inflation. So walk us through that process in the activity for this week. So there are 4 types of unemployment. They were what? Frictional, seasonal, structural, and cyclical. The two we are most concerned about are the cyclical and the structural. Structural because it's so long term, cyclical because it means the economy is contracting. Okay? But we'll be focusing on some of that cyclical unemployment and how you can use monetary and fiscal policy to help get rid of that cyclical unemployment and get us back to that natural rate of unemployment in future levels.